Come on.
They're right there.
Let's go. Move, 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 move.
This is Choices, Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sit next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
All right, guys, thanks for coming back. And just like every other time, if you see something in this episode particularly, that resonates with you, share it out to your audience. That's all I ask. If you see something that resonates, share it to your audience. Also, be informed that we did just launch a website that can be found at www.choicesnotchancespodcast.com. It'll stream our latest videos, hopefully cut out some of the censorship, and also we'll have new news about our guests and things of that nature in there. Without further ado, tonight's special guest is retired Major Fred Galvin of the United States Marine Corps. He's a special operator with MARSOC, did some time with Recon prior to that. And we're going to have another episode with Fred and get into his new book, A Few Bad Men, in just a couple weeks. But, just as the situation would have it, we have an ongoing situation that's time pertinent that we want to bring to the audience tonight for those of you that didn't know about it, concerning the trial for the MARSOC 3. And Fred's pretty read in on that way more than I am. He's been doing podcast shows trying to get the information out so we can get some help to these guys. And so without further ado, Fred Galvin, thanks for coming on, sir.
Thank you for having me on the show. Awesome.
So just for my viewers that maybe are completely, in the dark about this situation, if you could kind of unpack it for the layman, and then we can kind of divert from there what topics we bring up afterwards.
Absolutely. To give a little background, this situation we have currently going on right now stems from an event that happened back on the 1st of January 2019 in Erbil, Iraq, where 3 personnel from the Marine Special Operations Command, they were out with 2 of them were about ready to get promoted, a Marine Gunny and a Marine Chief. So all of their pay grades were the same, E7, but 2 were Marine Raiders and 1 was a Special Operations Corpsman. Mm-hmm. They're all assigned to the Marine Special Operations Command. And so while they were out, they ran into a gentleman who's a retired Army Green Beret, who's a contractor named Rick Rodriguez. There'd been a little altercation, some words exchanged earlier. So the gist of it was Rick Rodriguez, who had been a Green Beret, and his specialty while he was a Green Beret was medical. He felt that someone like the Chief Petty Officer, the Navy Corpsman, who was junior, who was still in, he hadn't retired, was less of a status, so he wanted him to kowtow to him. And if anybody ever knows Eric Gilmet, he's the very, professional, hat in hand, doesn't agitate anything. And you may think, oh, well, you're biased. Well, you just need to meet the guy before you pass judgment. Mm-hmm. But Eric is a quiet professional. So, and he's trying to stand it down. They actually get in the situation and they kick Rick Rodriguez out of the facility. And so he goes outside with 7 of his buddies and he's waiting for him. So after a prolonged period of time, when the MARSOC 3 head out, there's Rick Rodriguez waiting for him outside. And words are exchanged again. This time, Gunnery Sergeant Danny Dreyer, one of the 2 Marine Raiders, had his hands down by his side. He's trying to de-escalate it, and Rick Rodriguez comes in and punches him in the face twice. Now, Rick Rodriguez is a 275-pound bodybuilder. I don't want to make this about him because he did die, but he's every bit of a Hulk, coming after a much smaller guy. Clocks him twice, coming in a 3rd time. And the other Marine Raider, Gunnery Sergeant Josh Negron, comes in, uses 1 punch to neutralize the threat. And that's what anyone who's served in the Marine Corps in the last 25 years has had to go through the Marine Corps martial arts program. It took the place of the former line training that the Marine Corps used to have. Mm-hmm. And now this is the replacement. So it's required from boot camp all the way, and you have to go through this belt system, just like in regular karate, all the way up until the the time you get out of the Marine Corps. There's
Yep.
qualifications per rank. Very structured. It's not loosely like tribal. It's very standardized. So it's the mantra of the whole program is one mind, any weapon. So you're training Marines to defend themselves up to the point of lethal procedures with any weapon. It could be a belt, it could be a knife, it could be a helmet, it could be anything that they can get their hands on and fight and attack an opponent with. And but they're supposed to be doing it. Another mantra is the ethical warrior. So there's a lot of professional, mature lessons that are taught on the use of force and violence, but it's to ensure that Marines have that combat mindset, that when they are attacked and there's a fight, they don't retreat, run away. There's none of that. There's never a procedure where it's like, okay, in this case, run away. That's not what we train our Marines to do. So anyway, as I go back to the story, the gunnery sergeant comes in to defend his Marines, and that's what we're trained to do. When you're overseas, you get the whole riot act that if you're attacked, you are obligated to respond. If your fellow unit or individual buddy is attacked, you are obligated to respond.
Sure.
They say that if you don't, you will be charged. So in this situation, the Marines, let's look at what they did and what they didn't do. And let's see if it falls in the category of maturity from what they learned to do, or, if it escalated in something beyond that. So they were attacked by a larger individual, and there were 7 of his buddies that surrounded him. So Gunnery Sergeant Josh Negron came in and neutralized the attacker. There was one person that attacked. He hit one punch. Josh Negron was trained to utilize other weapons that are in the surrounding area. He did not do that. He did not further go into like a rear naked chokehold, do any other techniques, multiple blows, use a weapon, elbow, knee, fist, none of that. Nor did the other 2 throw anything. So it wasn't a dog pile. They didn't go after any of the other 7 who were there. They didn't go in and start trying to just, raise hell and take them out.
Now,
they did what they were trained to do.
If I might just ask a question, as far as the investigation goes, did they have witness statements and things of what actually occurred?
Yes,
and
did.
all
they
of that lines up
video.
with what you're saying.
Yes, and as did we talk about like a military free fall, the one eye doesn't lie. So whether you're doing something in the sky or you're doing like close quarter battle, usually those training facilities have a means to capture the the participants and debrief it and after action. And this was on a security camera, and it's gone to court a couple times. As you may have known, some of this case. So this happened, like I mentioned, 3.5 years ago, New Year's Eve, 2019, Erbil, Iraq. As things progressed, this is basically what most people sitting here listening to me say. This is self-defense. This guy came in, he started a fight, and the Raiders just did what they were trained to do. They weren't attempting to like, hey, Josh, get this. I'll get my ass kicked, and then you come in. Here's what we'll do. You come in and hit him so hard so he falls down on that first punch and hits his head on the ground, gets knocked out, and maybe he'll die 4 days later. That wasn't their plan. Wasn't their plan at all. But Rick Rodriguez did fall down, hit his head. They medically treated him. Chief Gilmet, the Navy medic, the corpsman, came in, treated him. They immediately called in, showing good judgment and integrity. They immediately called in, said, hey, this is what we got going on. And then what did they do after that? They took him back to the base where he was turned over to competent medical authorities, watched, and then they medically evacuated him to Landstuhl, Germany. And he died 4 days later from complications on choking on his vomit. So was it intentional? No. Did they do what they were trained to do? Yes. Now let's look at what the government did. Over a year ago, the government, if you have a strong case in the government, I'm not a sea lawyer, but you, just like any military engagement, you try to attack. You attack when it's to your advantage. They are not trying to aggressively attack. So over a year ago, they tried to put a gag order, and they use these words called protective order. It's just like, the Marine Corps doesn't have Marine Corps is largely a conventional force, and we're not like the Navy SEALs that have are completely separated from the rest of the Navy. We operate inside, the Marine Corps. So when we have things, we don't call it Hell Week in the Marine Corps. We call it Beach Week. Sounds less intimidating. Yeah. So we market it. Oh, it's Beach Week. Yeah. And so similar in this case, we have these 3 Marines that trained in Marine Corps martial arts, and they defend themselves. And the Marine Corps likes to use this very non-invasive words called a protective order. It's supposed to protect you. Okay, yeah, right. You're really concerned about protecting me, and I can't help but make some direct ties to the case that I was in called the MARSOC 7. This is completely different. Ours was in Afghanistan, but they put a gag order. They called it a protective order. It was a punitive order, said if myself and the other co-defendant, there was 2 of us that went to trial, that if either of us said a word to the media, that we would be charged. They said if our attorney said anything, the military attorneys would be charged and the civilian attorneys would be disbarred. So you use these kind of strong-arm
Who has the authority to do that?
Yeah, and this is what they try to do, is they try to intimidate people to where you don't really know. In our case too, this was a case in Afghanistan. They pushed, and although they didn't have the legal authority, they threatened a Marine who was legally immigrated from Mexico and legally naturalized as a U.S. citizen, legally joined the Marine Corps, and then they threatened to deport his mother if he didn't sign their fabricated statement. And this was Marine Corps commissioned officers who are legally not allowed to do this. This is against the law. They dressed in civilian clothes, posing as NCIS, and threatened this. They did a similar tactic to another Marine who was of Latino origin. They strong-armed. They tried to force him to take a polygraph. They can't order you to take a polygraph. They can't order anybody to self-incriminate, but they realize that if English is your second language and the way you have to process it on a polygraph, it can likely show. I mean, we do this to vet some of our sources, but it obviously can show deception indicated if the person has to translate it in their head. And but they didn't. They offered it to all 115 of us in our Special Operations Task Force, but they were aggressively going after this one Marine. English was his second language, so they just kept calling. He said it on the stand. If you read the book, you hear they just, even on Thanksgiving Day, they ordered him to come in and take this polygraph, and he just had enough of it. But they also did some ethnic targeting of a third individual of Egyptian descent. Just really went after him, and they tried to take him to a non-judicial punishment afterwards. So they use this kind of thuggery to intimidate guys. And in the case of this one, he signed their fabricated statement. That all came out on the witness stand. This type of coercion by the government, the prosecutors. There's been, you want to know what happened, Matt and Ryan? Guess here's what happened. Those prosecutors got a promotion. Of course they did. Literally got promoted from that. So I bring all this up as background because you see this same kind of thuggery going on and from headquarters Marine Corps. So they attempted to do a gag order on the MARSOC 3 last year. And then here, November last year, almost at the 3-year mark since this has been going on, the government realizes 3 years, we got to do something because we're probably getting some heat from Capitol Hill, because I've been making a stink about this myself for 3.5 years to the media. So here's what happens. They send this, one of the top 3 senior ranking Marine Judge Advocate General officers, a JAG officer, full bird colonel. So we only have one general in the Marine Corps Judge Advocate General staff. He's a 2-star general, and then from there it goes to colonel. So they send one of these thugs, Colonel Christopher Shaw from the Pentagon, comes down. Of course, I'm being facetious. I'm sure that Colonel Shaw, with 25 years in the Marine Corps, just on his own, no coincidence. He wasn't the made man, a wise guy, or mobster. But he goes down to Camp Lejeune, meets with 8 defense attorneys, starts talking to them about these high-profile cases, then squares off shoulder to shoulder, looks Captain Thomas, the defense attorney, military defense attorney for Gunnery Sergeant Josh Negron, looks him in the eye and says, "Your fitness report can protect you, but you are not shielded." He says, "The colonel who sits on your promotion board, who's the staff judge advocate, he will know who you are, and you are not shielded." So threatens this guy's career for doing his job. They're obligated to do the best they can for their client. So he compromised the case, and right as this is going to trial, his attorney has to tap out and say, "Hey, I can't ethically represent him." So, the government has their attorneys for the first over 3 years. That whole, cohesion, they keep that, and they take Chief Gilmet, the guy who treated Rick Rodriguez. They take him to trial first on February 9th. The Navy judge dismisses his case with prejudice. So everybody, that was a pretty big victory. Unfortunately, on June 29th, almost a month ago, the government had a hearing in Washington, D.C.'s Navy Yard to appeal that verdict in an effort to come back after Chief Gilmet.
Which is why they would drop it with prejudice, right? Because that means they can pick it back up, right?
Dismiss a case with prejudice, you're usually that kills the case. But to the Marine Corps, that was not what they wanted. They want to go after these guys. So, America, if you care about your military, everybody says, thank you for your service. Here's a chance to do something without spending any of your money. If you do a web search, www.congress.gov/members, contact your member of Congress. I'm going to give you a minute, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. So you can go get a pen and paper, please, and I'm going to tell you how to actually use the correct words. So I'll give you a minute, and I'll come back to this. But anyway, so there was a separate trial the Thursday before Chief Gilmet's on the 29th of December. Chief had his on 29 June last month. But the other 2 Marine gunnery sergeants were tried, and they're all 3 from those 2 different cases awaiting their verdict. This will be a verdict from a military judge. There was no jury. So I served in the Marine Corps for 26 years, 10 months, and 19 days, and then I went back after I retired. I served 4 more years as a civilian in the Marine Corps. I've never known a Marine Corps officer to take more than a month for a decision on. I mean, in the civilian court, they said it's the shortest decision by a jury or trial by a judge is like 14 minutes, and then it's 100 in the teens for the longest. They're usually not that long. The judge comes back out. I'm trying to compare it to Judge Judy or something, but it's usually a swift. I mean, our legal process is supposed to be a speedy trial, and when you have like a capital offense case hanging over your head for 3.5 years,
I can't imagine.
Look what happened to these guys. Let me explain this too for you, Ryan. All 3 of them, security clearances revoked. All 3 of them relieved of their duties. All 3 of them, all their proficiency pays, which adds up. It's like almost $1,000, completely stripped. You look at this colonel. He still enjoys it. He's still up at the Pentagon working for Headquarters Marine Corps, still has his security clearance, still enjoys his extra pay that he gets for being an attorney. None of that's, so it's this whole different spanks for different ranks, 2-tier justice system. And I hope your listeners realize what I'm talking about is not conjecture or hearsay. Now you got your pen and paper. This is what I want you to write down. And I'm asking the listeners to write this down so they can go back and contact their member of Congress. Again, that is at www.congress.gov/members, and do a little research about the MARSOC 3. That's MARSOC 3. And if you type in the Google search for GILMET, that's Gilmet, the last name of the Navy chief, and type in after that UCI, it's for unlawful command influence, and you'll be able to read a few recent articles about this case and how it was dismissed and how the government's still going after him and the other two special operators in this case. So, but I'd ask that you contact your member of Congress, your district congressman or woman, and then your two U.S. senators that represent you, and ask that they coordinate with the Justice for Warrior Caucus, which is led by Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas. He has represented several other warriors, but he's fighting, and he has fought for several years now. Unfortunately, this has gone on for years, the MARSOC 3. He has a military legislative assistant. When you call his office, you can ask the Washington, D.C. office. The military legislative assistant is Derek Miller. So if you contact them and say, hey, I am urging you to join shoulder to shoulder with Congressman Louis Gohmert and have this case dismissed. We have these types of cases because the people don't stand up for truth and for justice. Here's your chance to do that. If you really want to know what the character of these men are like, I know them, and they have all joined the military after we were attacked on 9/11. All they've known was combat. They have served in the most elite units in the Marine Corps, serving in both force reconnaissance and in Marine special operations, from one combat zone to the next, from Iraq to Syria to Afghanistan. The Marine who was assaulted twice and coming in was going to take it a third time if Josh Negron hadn't stepped in and done what he was trained to do. You know, he was wounded in action. He's got a Purple Heart. He's been awarded for heroism.
He's a Bronze Star, a Com V.
I believe it's a Bronze Star. So, but let's take the what ifs. Some people think like, no, but let's for a minute consider what ifs. What if Josh Negron hadn't stepped in and a 275-pound guy just beat him into the ground? We all know in the Marine Corps, you get punished if your buddy just gets crushed like that. You just stand by and be indifferent and don't do anything. That's not what the Marine Corps teaches. They don't teach in Marine Corps martial arts to run away or scream or slap or blow a rape whistle. They teach you to fight back and to use, and this is the thing, that they don't only just teach you this in the Marine Corps martial arts program, but ever since the Marine goes to boot camp, or if he's an officer, he goes off to candidate school, but these guys went to boot camp, and all the schools afterwards, and especially in special operations, they teach you that Marines only destroy what's necessary. That's an axiom of the Marine Corps. You know, whether you're a sniper or you're a explosive breacher or a military breacher, they say you're only using as much force is what's required to defeat the threat. And that's what they did. Again, they didn't go after and dogpile and go over the top and do anything else, you know, that is excessive. Just one punch. One punch to the face, stop the threat. They immediately treated him. And now look what we have. So the greater implication, let's just ask yourself, if you were out tonight with your family or your friends and you were attacked, or your wife or your loved one or your kids were attacked, and is this verdict, if it goes to convict these Marines, is that going to make you hesitate or think or do anything differently than if someone larger than you and you were surrounded by multiple opponents? Is that going to put some thought in your head not to act, not to defend? That is the greater question that we as Americans need to do. And what in the world are we even doing in a war zone if you get attacked and your guys are going to get punished if they respond at all? Again, we don't teach anything to do lesser. We don't do name calling. There's none of that. And actually, that's ridiculous to even consider that, because that's not how we train our United States Marines. This is the case that we have right now. What I've said is not embellished. It is the facts. I mean, all three of these Marines served their entire adult life as Marines, and they went on to serve in these elite units as commandos. They knew how to kill, and that was not what it was intended.
Mm-hmm.
They used the least amount to stop a drunk 275-pound guy from coming in and attacking somebody in the face for a third strike. We don't ever teach our Marines to just sit there and take it. But that is the role, in my opinion, you see from the case that I was involved in. The role of an officer is in the fight is to regulate the violence, to make sure that things don't get out of control. I would say in this case, they didn't get out of control. The violence was regulated. The other role of an officer is when, there's some gray area with your men, is you stand up and you absorb the pain. You take the heat. You don't let your men come down. But how come there's nobody standing in the, in the fold and saying, stop, this isn't,
I would go as far as to say that shame on you and you're a coward if you're anywhere in the rank structure that was leveraged into helping the conviction or the charges stick to these guys. And I hope that burns when you hear it, because, it should burn. You're going to leave your guys out there to hang. And like what you're talking about as far as people falsifying statements and lawyers quitting, it's like, grow a pair and stand up, be a Marine, and say, I will not do this. This is illegal what you're doing, sir. And I'm going to go straight to USA Today, and I'm going to let them know about it before you can even put a gag order on me. I mean, do that. Yes. And we've seen what happened, recently with Colonel Scheller, and they'll go right at your throat. They'll go at your mental health. When it's something that goes counter to their narrative, big Marine Corps, and I'm not even completely convinced they're not tied in with the regular media, because when stuff that they don't want to be on the media, it doesn't get there.
Well, that's a key point. Like in our case, the MARSOC 7, we have the longest trial in Marine Corps history, war crimes trial, for what happened in Afghanistan. And every time we had a defense witness, not even somebody who was an eyewitness, I'm talking defense witnesses with any exculpatory evidence, to include character witnesses. I had several Marine colonels, had been former commanding officers at Force Recon when we went into Iraq, had not been to Afghanistan, had several Marine Expeditionary Unit commanders that had not been to Afghanistan or were not in Afghanistan with us when this happened. They were there to provide character witnesses. What's the big deal? How come you saw the media, provide one side of the story, but you didn't hear any of their names at all? Because what they did in our case, they took those colonels, they took the media completely out of the courtroom again during all defense witness, testimony.
Now, so who is it? Who, at what level do you have the authority to do that?
So that's called the convening authority. In our case, it started out with Lieutenant General Mattis. He was the Mad Dog Mattis that everybody knows and respects. But when you really get to know him and you see, like, do you think that a bunch of Marine Corps field grade officers, I'm talking 2 majors, a full bird colonel, just decided to go in there and wear civilian clothes? And you ever see the movie Departed, where Mark Wahlberg goes in there and tries to, strong arm him, and it's Hollywood and he gets away with it. But this is real.
So you're saying that 2 JAG lawyers put plain clothes on and posed as NCIS?
Completely against the law.
Yeah, and so that was one of the.
And a nod to
yeah,
go, yeah,
100%.
Tune him up, hand him a bat, figuratively. I mean, you don't do something like that.
And these people haven't been charged. Like, this is out in the open. We can confirm that this happened. And these people haven't been charged with impersonating a law enforcement officer or anything like that.
Well, they all got promoted.
Yeah, they all got promoted.
Charged, they got rewarded for it, which makes you understand, how did they get away? You read the book, A Few Bad Men, which was just published. It came out last month. And you read chapter 28 and how they didn't just get away with it. They got promoted for this. Do you think that happened by accident? That they all these guys, what they did was treason. The traitors do that kind of stuff by throwing, 30 of us who were on that patrol that got blown up, shot at from both sides of the road, taking sniper fire. They pulled a vehicle across the road as an obstacle, blocking us in. And they had our sworn testimony. They had my polygraph, and they totally dismissed that. And they, you know why they believed the Afghans in that Taliban-controlled village right on the border of Afghanistan, Pakistan? I mean, obviously, we couldn't go in Pakistan, so that became a training sanctuary because we couldn't go there. So they bring these fully radicalized foreign fighters over there. They get them all juiced up, ready to conduct jihad. They bring them over right across the border on the paved highway that the United States funded. What do you think's on that first little village inside Afghanistan? Well, think of a Amazon fulfillment center. That's what it is. It's a big distribution or logistics node where they link up with their handlers and they go out to Kandahar, Kabul, Sangin, and get their jihad on all over Afghanistan to kill infidels. So, you know, we go into this town and they take the word of the Afghan locals in this Taliban-controlled village that said that we were drunk, that there was no car bomb, that the Marines used slingshots and hand grenades. Have you were in the military, did you ever hear about the technique of using a slingshot with a live hand grenade?
Nope.
You know, pull the pin and let's put it in a slingshot and see who in the right mind would ever believe any of that we were drunk at 9 o'clock. I mean, we left at 6 o'clock in the morning, but if we got drunk at 6 o'clock, and this is what it's just so ludicrous. Anybody that knows myself, I was on the patrol, but you ever seen a patrol, hammering down booze in Afghanistan?
Never once.
6 o'clock in the morning. And if so, if you leave, it does, but that's what the Marine Corps wanted to believe.
Yeah, that's what filled their narrative.
Ryan, do you honestly believe that, I'm talking people who plan to withdraw from Afghanistan, these aren't the B team, these aren't brand new guys, that was directed to happen by the Pentagon. People think, we really messed and fumbled that up. I ain't going to relate this, so I'm going to diverge to converge here.
Okay.
But if you bear with me for just a second, because I'm going to show you how ludicrous it also is to think that this was just accidental and unplanned. So we've been a part of the Marine Corps. Marines are known to go out on ships, and one of the key missions that we do is non-combatant evacuation operations. That's what happened in Kabul. So we look at, you always have, the Marine Corps, one of the key tenets is one is none. So you don't have just one, but you're identified with the Department of State because they're the diplomatic mission there, different airfields or seaports, but we don't have seaports in Afghanistan. So they call these airfields, APODs. So you're looking at multiple ones because you don't want to have it degraded down to just one. This is doctrinal for the Marine Corps. So you work with that embassy's Department of State official. He's called the Regional Security Officer, he or she. And they developed this plan. It's been in existence forever, but it's always to seize these airfields and provide security. So the Marines go in first. What happened in our case? They moved the Marines out. People say, no, the Marines were there. No, they first moved them out. Then they had to send them back in. This whole fumble, I'm going to tell you how these Marines follow doctrine. You plan a mission and you do it according to a doctrine. So why'd they pull them out? Is it accidental? No, it was intentional. When you fly into Washington, D.C., whether it's Reagan or whether it's Dulles, and you see the names on the tops of the buildings around the intelligence community there or around the Pentagon, those are who benefits from war. And when the president says, hey, I want you out, they're going to tell him, hey, this tail wags the dog. You think you're the commander in chief? We're going to show you, because we love war, and we're going to embarrass you for ruining our party. This is the No General Left Behind program. We wanted this thing to go on forever. So what happened? You saw it. The first thing that you do is you seize and provide security at those airfields. Then the next thing you do is you triage and you process American citizens who are category 1. They're the first to go out. And then Afghanistan. So what did you see on every major news channel? You saw plane loads of Air Force C-17s with Afghans, not Americans. Afghans were the first to go out, with Afghans like jumping on the sides of the aircraft, running down the tarmac. It was completely opposite. And then the Marines went back in after that. And then they provided security and at the worst possible airfield. And then after that, they started rounding up American citizens.
Yeah.
Like they didn't know that this was coming for over a year. So that wasn't accidental.
And then left
the reason
them.
yeah. So just like Colonel Shaw that went down to Camp Lejeune and squared off with Captain Thomas, do you think a colonel with 25 years doesn't know any better to have a conversation like that? And
I would think so.
Yeah, but he knew, and it's not accidental. He didn't. The chance of him, the likelihood of him doing that voluntarily as an accident and making such stupid remarks is probably zero.
Yeah, somebody said, hey, you need to go down to Camp Lejeune and you need to fix this right now. That's exactly what they did.
Well, and the case is weak. I mean, it's gone on for 3 years, a month shy of 3 years at that point. Here's the way to, like, hey, we got one general spot. You interested in it, Colonel Shaw?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's see. And they handed him the figure to the bat.
Mm-hmm.
You know what to do. We don't have made men in the Marine Corps. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be based on merit and honor.
That's one of the questions from a viewer is like, what is the motivation? In your case or this MARSOC 3 case, what is, like, it's already tragic. People are already getting shot up, blown up in your case. In this case, it's already a situation where somebody's dead. What is the motivation from upper echelon Marine Corps to punish their own people this way?
Yeah.
Like in a no matter what, we're going to get them kind of a way. Like, not what does the evidence say? And like, because if I'm a commander and this is my guys, I'm going, no, this is clearly self-defense, sir. What are we doing? We got to pump the brakes. Time out for a second. The guy came up and punched him twice. It was one blow back. He hit his head. This is extremely unfortunate, and I'm sure that the guys are sorry. But they didn't start this fight.
Yeah.
Instead, they dogpile these guys, and I don't understand the motivation for that. It's the same as I wouldn't understand the motivation for, say, like a first sergeant after going on a deployment with a bunch of, his guys being political about how he awarded them. I don't understand that. I would think that's like a badge of honor, beat your chest because you got these guys taken care of and awarded in the way in which they should have been awarded. Damn what everybody else thinks. It's like that same line of thinking. What is the motivation to hurt these guys?
Yeah, I'll put it in real simple terms that you understand. Recruit training. Let's go back to boot camp, okay? I don't know if it still goes on, but when I went to boot camp, the drill instructors sometimes will march one platoon into the other platoon, and it's for unit purposes of unit cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
You're never supposed to allow somebody to break ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a method to control your unit.
Mm-hmm.
And at a higher level with officers, they have a similar mindset in a different realm. It's not marching a platoon into a platoon, but if you break ranks, it's about power and control. And it's about having absolute power. And there's never anything good when you have absolute power. We're not a country that has or wants a monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you break ranks, so I essentially in the Marine Corps broke ranks. And I've been, the figurative black sheep for doing it. I know people know who Stu Scheller is. And he went on Facebook years before that. I fought the Marine Corps in court on Capitol Hill. I retired and started to tell our side of the truth. Used legislation, House Resolution 21 in the 115th Congress. Had a petition went out there, and basically the Marine Corps has this like manuals on campaigning, and I launched a campaign to clear our Marines' names.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, you break ranks from the senior officers. You will be disbarred and disavowed.
Mm-hmm.
They will not want you. I'm not going to get a Christmas letter from the Marine Corps. I'll never be, and I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be a made man, and I'm not going to bow down. And unfortunately, you see a lot of officers and a lot of enlisted Marines, they get to a certain level and they have a comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize this is a pretty good life. I got a wife and a kid, and They don't want to take that risk. So when it's time to take a stand, a tough stand, and you've seen some of these guys, especially in places like when Marines are stationed in Hawaii or California, and they get financially committed far beyond what they should be and can sustain. You know, if they're put to pasture, the game's over. And especially when their wives love a place like California, North Carolina, or Hawaii, some pretty good stations for some of these guys, they get comfortable and they won't stand. And that's what's happening right now with the MARSOC 3. Some people think, I may be making this up, and other people who may be in the Marine Special Operations Command are offended by what I say, but I'm just saying, take a good, honest assessment. Tell me one officer who's publicly stood up on active duty and said any of this in support of these guys.
No, most of them are slaves to the system, like you say. They're slaves to the money, and they know that, they watched what happened with Scheller recently. If they didn't need reminded, they're going to lock you up, tell you that you're crazy, put a hit out on your name, silence you on social media, put a gag order on you. Yeah, that's scary. It's scary stuff, but it's by design that they got these guys by the short and curlies, because they're
control.
Yeah, they got the control of their money and control of their life, but it does not make it right.
Yeah, the difference in the United States military legal system is, in the civilian world, if there's a jury trial instead of just a judge, the jury doesn't have somebody over them that has any say in their job retention,
in their future,
their job promotion, their next assignment. But this MARSOC case, this was a hearing, and if it goes to a court martial, this is going to, their charge is scheduled to go to a general court martial, which, if they're charged, that's the most severe. It can carry the death penalty. That Major Hassan Nadal, the former major, that did the Fort Hood shooting, he was sentenced to death. So for any of those who think like, it's a procedure, we're going through this thing, I was like, Pine Boxes is a consequence here. We're not talking some minor infraction. They're going after all three, to include Gunnery Sergeant Danny Dreyer, who was assaulted for homicide. And he's, the media sadly doesn't want to cover this. He was African American here. Wasn't. I shouldn't say he was. He is. He's a black man. The media doesn't want to cover that. He was hit twice by somebody physically stronger, numerically outnumbered, and he didn't even fight back. He was just hit, struck twice, coming in a third time. They don't want to cover that at all. So,
why would mainstream media not cover that?
Well,
is the Marine Corps in that same ear?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, because I know Stu Scheller had said, hey, I've tried to go to the left side of the media. They don't care. No. I've been at this game for 15 and a half years, and there's one side of the media that doesn't want to cover it at all. They look at the military as traditionally minded, and they're not going to have anything to do with it. So you're not going to have a voice on that side of the public. They will not, and
why?
I'm sure
it's not their narrative, or are they owned?
Well, it's the latter, and so here's why. So we're going to go to war. It's just a matter of time. Although the treaty that we had to defend Taiwan, that has time expired. But as I went back and said, you look at the names around the Pentagon and Langley, they want to go to war. We're going to have a war. This $58 billion.
War is a racket.
Yeah, war is a racket. That $58 billion that we gave for weapons to Ukraine, that's couch change compared to what Taiwan. China views Taiwan as they're going to have a reunification.
Yeah,
they're training right now in larger scope, and to do these amphibious operations, they're doing them off the east coast of China right now.
Yep.
And they are going to push those 96 miles across the Straits of Taiwan. And the only way to do anything is we're going to have to dislodge them, meaning we're going to do airborne and amphibious operations where tens of thousands of Americans die. It's super expensive. We will launch so many missiles, and the owners, the boards of directors, that's their big payday. Yeah,
Time to pay daddy.
That's when it starts to rain,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no morals.
It's no wonder that these same guys are the same ones that come out of general positions and into Raytheon and GD and all the rest of them.
The No General Left Behind program. Where did General Mattis come from and go to?
General
When he
Dynamics.
retired, he was on 4 boards. One of them is General Dynamics.
Yep.
When Trump fired him, he went right back to General Dynamics.
Yep.
Where did the last chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford, go? Lockheed Martin, the nation's largest defense firm. Where did this current Secretary of Defense come from? After he was retired 4-star general, from Raytheon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
imagine that the 3 top dogs in the weapons manufacturing business are the ones running these hit campaigns on their own Marines that sacrificed for the last 20 years for them. It's interesting.
By the way, Rick Rodriguez, who, without any malice or intention from the MARSOC 3, died. He was a contractor with Lockheed Martin, nation's largest defense contractor. So, and like I go back to, comparing it to the civilian world, and some people are like, oh, you can't really do it. Well, why in the civilian world? That is a justice system, but it's uninfluenced. The convening authority, like I mentioned, what General Mattis did in our case, you have 45 criminal investigators and 4 prosecuting attorneys dogpiling on 7, and they narrowed it down to 2 of us.
Mm-hmm.
They put a gag order on us. They threatened Marines, did this ethnic targeting, and then they moved the media out of the courtroom, had this one-sided narrative. They used a procedure called a court of inquiry. Read the book A Few Bad Men, and when you get to the back of it, and you're like, how did they get away with this? I mean, I have movie producers, lawyers. I had Steve Bannon just saying, how did they get away with it? Trust me, this happened. It's a nonfiction case. It's happening right now to the MARSOC 3. It's just the mainstream media won't cover any of it.
Let me ask you this. Let's pretend for a second that we get through this and all these guys are found not guilty. Do they back pay them for all the rank that they've lost over the last 3 years and the special operations pay that they lost over the last 3 years? Because they're not going to be able to fulfill any monetary value for the shame that they put on them that was unnecessary and the loss of time. Like, are they prepared to do that if these guys lose, or are they going to completely be ostracized?
They'll probably give them the promotions that been on hold for 3.5 years, but back pay will come most likely. And I'm not the convening authority, but they'll probably get back paid from what they would have made. But the proficiency pay, they'll probably argue that we had to make sure that your actions were ethical, and you technically didn't jump out of airplanes or blow things up or
because don't you have to stay proficient yearly, like annually? So all they had to do is let their cert run out and never send them back to a requal, and they can cut their pay that way, right?
And so the horrible thing is when they take them out, they not only get the pay stopped, but technically by the order, like if you don't dive every 6 months, or if you don't jump every quarter, you get your proficiency pay for that cut. But if you don't do it for 3 years, you have to requalify. You have to go back to Marine Combatant Dive School, which people who've been in for, these guys are coming up on their 20-year mark. Some of them are over it. But that's not an easy course to go through.
No, not even as a young man. They don't have some like gentleman's course, for old guys. That's technically you have to go through the whole thing again. And usually that's only gun decked and winged for officers and stuff. They usually don't. That's where the 2-tier justice system is just wrong. And a lot of our senior Marine Corps leaders, I've seen these trolls go out on social media and they do some hating on me because they're like, an officer is actually a retired officer, one of their own. I wasn't just one of their own. Before, reconnaissance was a occupational specialty for officers. They always would say, don't ever go and stay very long at a reconnaissance unit. You're an infantry officer. It'll destroy your career. That's what I went to go do when it was dangerous for other people to stand up, and just career-wise, careerism. Others wouldn't do that. And I'm not beating my chest. I'm just saying I've got more time in the hellholes of the world and doing the dirty work than these current guys ever had. Most of these guys came over
most of the senior officers, I should say. My peers came over and tried to dodge all the heavy tax up front. There's a few guys I know, and you know who you are if you're listening to this. There's a few guys that went the old-fashioned way, whether they came up as enlisted and became an officer, or they came in as an officer and they spent some time in the community. But most of them didn't. Most of them didn't even want to go to the schools. When they gave the Marine Corps the little Raider badges, there's 150 of them, the ominous dominus. And the majority of you know who you are. You know, it's supposed to say they did special reconnaissance or direct action. Most of those guys in the 150, that they just ominous dominus on the officer side, never, you know, it's embarrassing that we just gave that away, because that's not what the SEALs or Green Berets did. Like, oh yeah, I think you did it. You're my pal. Let's go. I mean, the people that came in the community at the start of MARSOC, that's why I wanted to get out of there after our case, because they were just so fat and unfit and morally unfit. And it was just the most pathetic thing I'd ever seen in my life. They opened the floodgates. It was not the force reconnaissance, which we used to have 6 platoons in our organization on paper, on both coasts and 3 in Okinawa. We would only fill 5 because we wanted the quality. We didn't want to have another platoon especially with an officer that didn't have, so I mean, you're talking, you know, 5 spots for an entire division of Marine infantry. The standard was very high. Now they have like 10 times as many. I mean, here's an organization pushing 3,000. At that time, there was the actual operators of a trained force reconnaissance, East Coast, West Coast, and in Okinawa, Japan, was 300 guys in the actual formations. And I'm not trying to underestimate or diminish what guys are doing in MARSOC, but I'm just saying the quality of officers. Where are you now in standing up for these guys who come out and take a stand? You know, most of the guys
I would challenge any of them that are involved in this situation and been quiet this long. Like, better late than never, but like, refine your integrity and step up for these guys. Damn the money and damn the system, and make them take it from you. Easy to say for me sitting here, but never in my career, never in my life have I hung a Marine out to dry like this, like some of the ways that I've seen it happen recently. Yes.
So there has to be a complete overhaul of our military and our military justice system. It's broken right now. When we see that as we're gearing up, everybody's calling it the near peer, you know, this competition that's going to go down in the Straits of Taiwan, there in the East China Sea. We're going to have tens of thousands, not, you know, we lost 7,000 in Iraq and Afghanistan, just over. This is going to be, you know, right out of the gates, that's going to be the casualty, you know, the first few days. And I'm not making light of it or joking. That's the facts. That's what we were planning for. We can't be led by incompetent commanders. Yeah. We have a moral hazard when you allow this type of cancer to metastasize. And that's just what it's doing. You look at why America's parents don't want to send their sons and daughters into the military right now. Why there's just over 2 months left in this fiscal year, and the Army hasn't even met 50% of their recruiting goals, and their cure is, we'll just lower the standards.
Would you have your 18-year-old son come in right now?
Well, I don't have an 18-year-old son, but it would.
I understand. Hypothetically, your son's 18. What do you tell him when he says, I want to join the Marine Corps?
Yeah, it's changed so radically. I mean, how could somebody it's not the Marine Corps that people knew. And I know somebody, a good friend of mine, who served in the Force Reconnaissance community, he's a legend, went on to serve in other more elite units than in Force Reconnaissance and Marine Special Operations. His son graduated Naval Academy, was an F-35 pilot. They sent him to a board of inquiry and he's been separated he got kicked out of the Marine Corps after flying the most advanced aircraft in our arsenal. 15 years of service, Marine Corps major, because he didn't take the vaccine. I know another guy that same thing, got out in the 20-year mark, 21 years Marine. He was in our Fox company in the MARSOC 7 case, got a commission eventually, went from sergeant in our company, got promoted all the way up to gunny, got a commission, and retired as a major, and but he said he's not going to serve another day. And you know, you see what our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Miley, you see what Secretary of Defense, you know, Lloyd Austin are saying about the biggest threat in our military is white male extremism. They're trying to divide our country, and we all served in the military. The three of us on this call. Let's talk about that for a second. Have you ever been in a formation where you've seen somebody in bed sheets, or for those of us that did personality targeting for a career, and you've identified who the key leaders are, how they are organized, who they communicate to, what means they use for communication, how they're armed, where they're located. Let's just see if you're going to spew that false hatred, you know, from the Pentagon and say this is our biggest threat. Who are these leaders? Identify them. Where are they located? If they're in our military, they should be hard. I mean, how are they communicating?
Yeah.
But they've been
I completely agree.
For the last year and a half of this administration without any evidence. So don't open your mouth unless you got some incontrovertible facts.
Right.
But
I just assumed they were falling back on like the SS campaign from years ago. But even then, and am I saying that I don't think there's any racist behavior that happens in the Marine Corps or in the military? I'm not saying that. I'm saying to say that it's the number one
biggest threat,
the biggest threat to our service. I would argue to say that the command is the biggest threat to our service right now. Yeah. They're denigrating their own service at the behest of people that can't even vote a proper budget to give us ammo in a year. And like that's who they're cowtailing to. And it's interesting. I had a while back, I had Lieutenant Colonel retired Jonathan Myers on, and we covered his book, American to the Core. But he said the same thing. He said these guys are they get to a place where yes is the only answer because it's your career, and then it becomes political. And he said, you know, there's political interplay all the way coming up as an officer. But once you hit that general staff level, it's like play or you're gone.
Yeah.
And we've made that we've built that in to our institution that anybody with a bad mark or went against command or maybe had a questionable, you're never going to see a star. It's only going to be the guys that always pleased their bosses over and over and over. And like you said, they're getting promoted for making those acts. So, guys, if you're listening out there, please help us do something about this. I'm going to make my calls and my emails as soon as I get this podcast together. I'm going to get it out to you ASAP, and take the time, pause the podcast, write the information down that Fred's given us here. Make your calls out to your senators and your members in Congress and make this complaint. We're taking some of the best and most elite warriors that have sacrificed their entire youth for this country, and they're not being done right. And that's the bottom line. And it's happening over and over, and it's going to continue to happen. And it's going to continue to denigrate our forces to a point that when this Taiwan thing goes down, we're going to be in real trouble. Thank you for coming out, Fred. Thank you for sharing the MARSOC 3. I'm going to take the links and stuff and put them on my website too. So if you guys go to www.choicesnotchancespodcast.com, you're going to be able to view this episode in its entirety, as well as I'm going to plug links in from the links that were described here with information on how you can get in contact with your representatives. Make it stupid easy. That way, all you got to do is a couple clicks away and then air your grievances. Fred, any last words to the audience before we get off the hook here?
Yes, time and action. We need to execute now, and we need to take very precise action. So what we mentioned as far as contacting your members of Congress right now, having them taking a stand for the MARSOC 3. So just educate yourself a little bit about this case. Like I mentioned, there's plenty of things out there in the media. Know the facts on it, and have them join shoulder to shoulder with Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas via his military legislative assistant, which is Derek Miller. Have them do that as soon as you can. And if you can't get in touch with them, November's right around the corner. Get rid of them. Don't vote for anyone that won't give you the time of day to talk about one of the few things it says our federal government's designed to do, and that's to provide for our national defense. If they don't have time for that, I don't care. That's not the person that needs to be representing you. Here's your chip. If you want to know who to vote for, find somebody to listen to your voice right now. Mm-hmm. And that will listen and take action. But if they don't have time for this, they're probably trying to raise campaign money, and who knows, what other kind of crooked endeavor they're in. But take a stand right now is your opportunity to affect the lives of 3 good men, the MARSOC 3. So thank you very much again. Appreciate it.
Fred Galvin, everybody. Hey, just to echo that before we get out, guys, take action right now. Do it right now. Get on your website right now. Get on your computer right now. Write it down and get these requests moving. These guys don't have much longer, and the more pressure we can apply, the better. I'd also say this: if nothing else, if you do nothing else when you got to this point in the podcast and you can't bring it to yourself to contact anybody, you don't have time, just go to the bottom over there and click that share button. Click that share button and get this message out to your audience, your pages, and let them help these MARSOC 3, these warriors that have put it all on the line for their country, that are getting done dirty and having the rug pulled out from under them. All right, guys, I appreciate you coming out. Like I said, like, share, comment, go to the web pages and get this message out there. Share it to your crowd. For choices, not chances. Matt, you got anything? Matt's good. All right, guys.
Just want to say thank you.
Not too far. You're marking ability. Hit him. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.